Morning. So today's lesson is about the human circulatory system, which looks at how our blood is transported through the entire body. So it's in your textbooks from pages 114 to 129. So just a quick recap about the human circulatory system. It's basically how the heart, the largest muscle used within the system, pumps blood through the entire body. As you can see here, through the arms, through the legs, and most importantly, it supplies blood, which is primarily proteins, all the nutrients your body needs. It transports all this, and also oxygen. So it also transports it to all our important organs, and very importantly also to the brain. So it's very interesting because the heart has actually, well, it has to pump very hard against gravity to ensure that our head and our arms can get blood as well. So that's why usually when we lay down at night, when we sleep, the heart actually doesn't have to work as hard because we're horizontal. So blood flow is, doesn't have to go against gravity. Okay, so first of all, let's take a closer look at the heart itself. So again, as I mentioned, this is like actually a muscle. So it's definitely not those heart-shaped, what we think is a heart that we usually get on Valentine's Day and so on, that we draw. But the heart is actually a very big muscle, and anyway. So it actually looks kind of like a fist. If you make a fist, that's actually the shape of a heart, so it's not the way we think about it. So this is basically what it would look like on the outside when we look at it. But if we take a transverse section through it and look on the inside to see what goes on, there are some areas. Let's start at the top. We have things called veins and arteries. In this picture, the blue represents the veins. Usually the vein means deoxygenated blood, so it brings blood from the rest of the body to the heart that does not have oxygen. Then the aorta and these tubes, or the main artery, the aorta is the main artery that takes oxygenated blood or blood with oxygen to the rest of the body, usually the brain and the limbs and so on. So when the blood comes in, it usually comes in at this superior vena cava, this vein. It goes into the first chamber. The heart primarily has 4 chambers. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. Okay, so we have 2 atriums. This is the right atrium, and this side is the left atrium. And at the bottom here we have ventricles, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. And before you get confused, yes, usually this is the left side and this is the right side, but imagine you looking at a person. His right side would be your left side and vice versa. So if you think of this as your own heart, this would be on the right side of your body. Anyway, it takes a bit of imagination. But anyway, this is the right side, this is the left side. So the right ventricle and the left ventricle over here. So when it comes into the right atrium, it goes through to the the right ventricle, sorry, and then it leaves again with another vein. So it means it does not get oxygenated here. It just pumps through the heart. So this then goes through the pulmonary vein. It goes out here, which is the pulmonary artery. I have to just double check again. Anyway, so it goes out here, and then later on when it comes back from the lungs and being oxygenated, it comes back through the should be an artery here as well. Okay, so then it comes into the left atrium, through here to the left ventricle, and then it leaves again through the aorta. So from here it would go to the rest of the body, to the limbs, to the brain, everything in the body that needs oxygen. Okay, something else just to mention, that this unfortunately doesn't show on this picture, but this middle section of the muscle is the septum. So the septum is this thick walled muscle part that separates the 2 ventricles. And also to take note, within the septum are what is called the Purkinje fibers. So the Purkinje fibers are basically nerve endings that are inside the septum, and the nerve impulses that the heart each time the heart beats, it creates these nerve impulses within the septum and the Purkinje fibers, and then those nerve impulses goes to the brain and tells the brain how much the heart is pumping for heart rate, how quickly it's pumping per minute, and also how high the blood pressure is there low blood pressure within the heart or high blood pressure? As we know, high blood pressure generally is very bad for you. Okay, so basically these nerve endings tries and regulate what the heart is doing. Then if you would notice here, these are called the tricuspid valve. There's basically these little valves in the heart. Here's the first valve, and here's the mitral valve. So what this does is basically when the blood enters the atrium and goes through to the ventricle, it can't go back to the atrium because as soon as the blood tries to push back, these valves closes. So it's impossible for the blood to go back. And there's a valve here as well, a pulmonary valve. So as soon as the blood that's in the ventricle goes through into this vein, and it can't go back, it pushes against these valves and it closes. It's like a door that only allows you to go one way. As soon as the heart rests its pumping, the blood will stay here. It can't go back. The same with this side. Here again is another valve, the mitral valve. So as soon as the blood that was in this atrium goes into the ventricle, it can't go back. It can only go forward, and again, as soon as it's here, it can't go back again. Okay, let's take a look at blood vessels. So these are basically in your entire body. Here's a pretty picture of this, your heart, and everywhere are all these blood vessels. So basically the blood vessels are the things that transport the blood to the rest of the body. So as I mentioned, you have two types. You have arteries and you have veins. And this picture again is not really red and blue in your body. It just represents that the red represents oxygen. So these hemoglobin cells, the red blood cells, they do have oxygen. They carry oxygen at that moment. But the veins is represented as blue, meaning there's no oxygen in this blood. Okay, so as you can see here, the arteries and veins, physically, they do differ from one another. The artery is just this type of tube that just allows the blood to go in one direction, but there are no valves. In the vein, there are these valves that allows the blood to only go in one direction. It can't go back. So primarily this has to do with how hard the heart pumps the blood. So the closer the arteries or the veins are to the heart, the bigger the space is in the tube. The further away the arteries or the veins are from the heart, they will narrow and become narrower to increase the blood pressure. So because remember, the farther away it goes from the heart, the harder the heart will have to work for the blood to pump. So when these arteries and veins actually constrict and become a little bit smaller, it means the heart doesn't have to pump any harder. It can pump the way it does, and the narrowed tube also carries the blood further. Okay, so there are actually all these muscles within the arteries and the veins as well. So along with the heart pumps, the muscles of these arteries and veins also help the movement or facilitate the movement of the blood in the one direction. Okay, then we also have something like capillaries. So if you have your vein and you have your artery, they actually branch off. So these branches are known as arterioles for the arteries and ventricles for the veins. And then together, can you see this? It becomes like an intricate, where all the ventricles and the arterioles come together. It forms things called capillaries. So basically here is where the capillaries are around organ or around certain cell body tissues. And what happens here is that the oxygen is being taken out of the arterioles or the artery. It's taken out into the tissue cells around these arteries, and then the deoxygenated blood goes into the veins. So basically oxygen exchange happens in capillaries as well as nutrient exchange. Everything that's in this blood, like nutrients and water and oxygen, is basically diffused from its high concentration, because this one is high in the arteries, and then it diffuses through these tubes to the tissue cells, and then goes into the rest of your body, into the organs it needs to go, or wherever in the body it needs. And then, as I mentioned, in the veins, there are less nutrients, less oxygen, less water now, and this goes back to the heart to be to the lungs, actually to the heart, and then to the lungs to get more oxygen. Okay, and yeah, we have a picture of what it looks like in the inside of one of these arteries. Your red blood cells, and here are actually a few white blood cells. Yeah, that's what they look like. Okay, so let's take a closer look at blood flow. So first of all, we actually differ from other animals. Usually all mammals have a double and closed system. What does this mean? It's double because the blood goes through the heart twice. Okay, first of all, it comes from, let's say, your brain, and it also comes from your legs. It goes into the heart, out of the heart. That's once. Then it goes to the lungs. Then again, it comes into the heart and out of the heart, back to the brain or to the legs. Okay, so basically it enters and leaves the heart once, twice. Okay, that's why it's called a double system, but it's closed because we have veins and arteries. The blood don't directly touch our lungs or touch the rest of our organs in our body. So it's a closed system. Through diffusion, all these oxygen and nutrients goes into the lungs or into the organs it needs to go to, arms and legs and brain and so on. So it's closed. We have arteries and veins. Okay, so the circulatory system can be divided into two parts. So your pulmonary circulation, that refers to our lungs. So pulmonary circulation is just how it enters into the lungs and how the blood is being oxygenated. So it gets oxygen from the lungs. Then our second circulation is called the systemic circulation. This refers to everything else. So it goes to the arms, it goes to the legs, and it goes to the organs. As soon as the blood has been oxygenated, it goes through the heart again, and now it goes to the brain, or it goes to the arms, or it goes to the legs. Okay, so pulmonary refers to lungs, and systemic refers to everything else, where your oxygenated blood goes and gets deoxygenated. Okay, then we have phases of the cardiac cycle. So cardiac meaning heart. What happens in the heart? How does the heart pump itself? Okay, so I need to explain two principles or two concepts to you. It's first of all, systole. Systole is when the heart pushes or when the muscles contract. It's when the heart actually pumps. Okay, so the muscles work together to pump blood. That's systole, so it's active. Then we have something called diastole. So diastole is when everything relaxes. So that's when the heart doesn't pump anything. Blood can just freely enter into the heart cavities or those chambers, the 4 chambers into the heart. Think of it as systole, meaning it's a systemic process. It's active. Unfortunately, I can't think of a beautiful word that starts with an S. But systole, it's active, but diastole means it relaxes. Okay, so there are mainly 4 phases of the cardiac cycle, but I see this picture shows 5. Okay, so the first step is usually when through the heart, the muscles contracting, it brings blood into the atriums, both. So this happens at the same time. Deoxygenated blood in the right side and oxygenated blood on the left side. So what happens is these muscles contract and it enters, and the valves open and the blood enters the ventricles. Okay. After this, there's a ventricular systole. Actually, the first phase starts here. So the muscles contract and pressure starts to build within these ventricles. And the third, or I call it the ventricular systole, first phase and the second phase. So it's primarily 1, 2, and 3 is basically what happens here. Okay, but in this case, now the heart, can you see the heart contracts, the muscles goes closer to one another, and the heart becomes a bit smaller and elongated. So now all the blood is being pushed to these arteries and to the veins. So the heart is pumping or pushing all this blood that's in the ventricles out of the heart. Okay, and then we get ventricular diastole. And again, ventricle means these two chambers. So it's ventricular diastole, they relax. And now, again, can you see the blood tries to flow back because everything relaxes. But those valves actually keeps the blood from coming back. Okay, and then we have ventricular diastole. So still part of the same early and late, same phase. Now these valves relaxes, and any blood that was starting to fall into the atriums starts to go into the ventricles. But this is relaxing, and this phase is also relaxing. Nothing is pushing or anything. The phases where the heart is actually working are in these three phases, where the blood is being pushed from the atriums into the ventricles, and then in the ventricles, pressure is building up, and then everything is pushed out of the ventricles. Okay, then, don't know if you have ever seen electrocardiogram. Electrocardiogram is usually, I want to get a good example, if you ever have watched a medical documentary or a medical series or something, they usually show the person's heart rate or the person lying in the hospital, and you can see their heart rate on a TV monitor. So usually what this means is this is a normal heart rate. And usually each of these phases, the 4 phases, is 1, 2, 3, 4, usually, is the 4 different stages or these stages when something happens. So primarily this spike is when the heart pumps everything out of the ventricles. So this is the main spike of the heart when everything is being pushed out of the heart. So the heart works the hardest here, and it's represented with this spike. And then also I just want to mention here is heart rate and pulse rate. So heart rate again is how quickly, it means how quickly the heart can actually go through all these the cardiac cycle. Heart rate is how quickly the heart pumps the blood through it. And then your pulse rate is basically how quickly all the blood goes through your veins and how quickly it's being pumped through your body. And also, as you know, if you do exercise and so on, it means your heart starts working quicker. Your heart rate increases and your pulse rate, the rate at which the blood flows through all your veins and arteries also increases because you're doing exercise. So everything is being sped up. Okay, then I just want to go on to the lymphatic system. So you know now the circulatory system, so this is basically all your veins and arteries in your body, but you also have something called the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system, if you were to look at it, looks something like this. They are called lymph nodes, all these little round things, and in detail this is what it looks like. These are lymph nodes, and here's even more detail. It looks literally like this small, little bean-shaped button or something. Okay, so basically what the lymphatic system does is as soon as blood is being, or nutrients and oxygen and everything is being exchanged over here, so this is now your body tissues, again, if the flow was from the artery to the vein, oxygen goes out of the body. Also within the bloodstream, in your arteries, you have your red blood cells, you have your white blood cells, you have platelets, you have also blood plasma. So plasma is that watery substance. You need water to make the blood plasma. So when the plasma actually overflows and enters into the tissue, the body tissues, what the lymphatic system actually does is the overflow of that liquid goes into the lymphatic system, and eventually the lymphatic system puts back all that liquid into the bloodstream. So it's basically a mop-up thing. Any overflow goes into the lymphatic system and puts it back into the bloodstream. Another thing about the lymphatic system is that actually it manufactures white blood cells. Lymph is also known as white blood cells, and white blood cells is actually important in our immune response. So if you have certain bacteria or diseases in your body, the white blood cells attacks those bacteria and viruses and gets rid of it from the body. So the main functions of this system is to protect the body from harmful microorganisms, and also it plays an important role in this immune response, and also it absorbs things like fats and proteins, also to the rest of the body. If there was any overflow that came into the blood plasma or into the body tissues, the lymph system carries it and tries to put it back into the bloodstream. Or again, if it was something bad, too much fat, or if there were any bad microorganisms or things, your body actually tries to get rid of it, usually through sweat. So the lymph system also it also ends up, or yeah, in sweat glands and so on. So it actually tries to get rid of all these bad things out of the body, either through the sweat, or it tries to get rid of it through your urine, or maybe through your feces. So yes. Let's look then at certain diseases that can be caused or can go wrong in your body. So first of all, again, this is what your arteries look like. This is what a normal artery looks like. Your blood goes through, no problem. But then you can get things like fat buildup in the walls, in the wall of the arteries. And usually when this happens, it means that the area where the blood has to go through narrows. And this what increases the blood pressure. You can imagine if you have like a hose pipe and the water comes out naturally, but you put your thumb or your finger at the end of the hose pipe, you can immediately feel a buildup of pressure at the end of the hose pipe, and the water comes out quicker. So this is the same type of effect. Imagine this is like a thumb pushing here. So when the blood comes through here, it struggles, but then bursts out the other side. So it increases the heart rate as well. And if it really gets bad and this plaque even gets bigger, it can make a complete blockage known as a blood clot. Okay, so this disease is actually known as atherosclerosis, the buildup of all these bad cholesterol in the heart arteries. So basically, with blood pressure, yes, it can increase blood pressure and cause high blood pressure. Your high blood pressure can be, some symptoms could be things like headache or dizziness or blurred vision. And again, if you have high blood pressure, this can actually lead to other diseases. First of all, it can lead to a heart attack. Heart attack if this blood clot happens close to the heart and the blood can't flow through the heart anymore, you can get a heart attack. And with a stroke, this refers to the brain. So if this happens close to anywhere where the brain is, it means that the brain can't get any oxygen. The hemoglobin or the red blood cells can't get through. No oxygen can be transferred to the brain, and then you get a stroke because your brain can't function anymore. Okay, and then usually, how can we prevent or treat some of these diseases? So first of all, medication. Main medication, aspirin is like a blood thinner. It actually thins your blood and makes the blood can move through quicker. So there are a couple of oral medications you can use, but there's also something called an angioplasty or a stent. So angioplasty is when you have a blocked artery and they put like a balloon inside your artery to open up the area. And then sometimes they put in a stent, and this is like a metal tube thing they put inside. So basically what this does, it prevents the arteries from closing up. It keeps the walls open. It keeps these tubes open so that the blood can keep on flowing through. And then I'm sure you all know about surgery. So what can happen, coronary artery bypass, is if there is an issue in one of the arteries, they actually bypass, meaning they go around this blockage. So what they try and do is they try to manipulate the blood flow to not go through this artery that is blocked, but they try and go around it so that it can eventually get to the heart. So that's with surgery, something like that can also be done. And then something like heart transplants. If people have heart problems, I'm sure you all have heard that you can get, if somebody donated, well, usually they have to die. If they died and they told before they died that somebody can use their heart, they take that heart, should be healthy and working and everything, and they give that heart to somebody who needs it, who has heart problems. So you can actually transplant that organ into another person. But there are sometimes complications because your body can reject your organ because the blood and the DNA and everything of that organ isn't the same as yours. Anyway, but that's one option. And then another option is pacemakers. So as I mentioned, within the heart, um, in the bottom here, there are nerve endings called the Purkinje fibers that regulate your heart rate, that tells the brain, okay, your heart needs to pump quicker, or it is pumping quicker, or it's pumping slower, what is the blood pressure, and so on. But some people have issues with this, and then that doesn't work, so the brain doesn't know what's going on. So then people have to get artificial pacemakers. It's like little devices that are actually implanted in the chest cavities or the chest area that regulates or gives electrical pulses to the heart that keeps the heart rate regular and keeps the heart on pumping. Okay, that in a nutshell is what happens with the circulatory system.